Hi, I'm Adam. Welcome back to Godot Game Lab. In this final episode of Season 1, we'll add sound effects and music to the game. So we'll have a couple of sounds playing when you buy units, for example, when you combine them, when you move them around the grid, when you buy XP, when you reroll for new units, or when you sell existing units. Let's see how we can do this. So for this episode, we don't really have an architecture overview, but we can talk a bit about singletons, or as we call them in Godot, autoloads. So for the sound and music system, we don't really mind if they are intertwined with all the other systems inside the game, because we want it to be easy to add music and sound effects. Again, there are many different ways to do this in Godot. It's just a solution that I really like personally. So that's what I ended up using for this project as well. If you don't know what a singleton is or how it works, the documentation page is super detailed and awesome, so I definitely recommend you checking it out. Link will be in the description. But in real simple terms, what we do is we define scenes, which will be automatically loaded under the root viewport, so they will be loaded before any other scenes or nodes are instantiated inside the project, and a global class name will be associated with those nodes and scripts, so we can essentially access any of those in any other nodes or scripts we want to. I have my project open here, and the first thing we want to do is we want to set up different audio buses for the music and the sound effects. So inside our bottom panel here, let's click on audio, and you see that we only have a master bus defined. Without going into too much detail, let me tell you some advantages of using different audio buses for the sound effects and the music. So if we click on this add bus button here, a new bus will be added, and we can select this text here and rename it to something like music, and repeat the same process. Click on add bus and rename this one to something like sound effects, or I just type in SFX with all caps. So what we can do is that we have these sliders here which control the volume of those buses. So if we have a different bus for the sound effects and the music, if you have a settings menu inside the game, you can control the volume independently from each other. And you do have the master bus, which works as you'd expect. If I take this down, then all of the other sound effects will be quieter, but I can individually edit the music and the sound effects. Okay, that's one thing we wanted to do. We can close the audio for now. Oh, and actually, if we open it again, one more quick tip. If you develop your game for quite a long time, after a while, listening to the music for the 100th time will be quite annoying. So you have these buttons here, and if you click on the M button, you can toggle muting that whole audio bus, right? So you don't have to listen for the same song a million times. Pretty handy. But for now, we want to test it, so let's make sure to uncheck mute. And what we want to do is to expand the scenes folder in our file system hierarchy, right click on it, create a new folder, and we'll call this audio_player, click on OK or press enter, and right click on that new folder, create a new script, and let's call this audio_player.gd and click on create. We expand the folder and double click to open it up inside the script editor. Okay, so this is the one example where we actually don't want to use a custom class name. Why? Well, because for auto-loaded classes, a global class name will be automatically added, and we can set it up in the project settings. So you shouldn't use class name for singleton or auto-load classes, because this is handled by the engine by default. Notice that we call the script audio player. We don't have a separate music player and the sound effects player node, because they essentially do the same thing. They'll just use a different bus, right? We have two methods here. One is called play with two parameters. We have an audio stream, which will be the sound effect or the music file we want to play, and we have an optional boolean parameter which will default to false called single. The method itself will return nothing, so it's a void method. And here's how we can play a sound. First of all, if we don't have a valid audio stream resource, a valid sound effect or music file we can play, then we can return from this function immediately. If that single boolean parameter is given and it's set to true, then we need to call the stop method, and I'll explain in a second why we need this. But after each of these checks, what we do is we grab all the children of this node we have, and all of those child nodes will be audio stream players, which is a node that can play audio files. And we search for the first one, which is currently not playing any audio, right? So if it's true that it's not playing anything at the moment, we set its stream property to the audio stream we want to play, call the play method, and return from the function because we no longer have to iterate through any of the remaining children if we already found one player that is not occupied. Then we have the stop method, which does the exact opposite. It iterates through all the children again, the audio stream player children, and calls the stop method on each of those players. So the way this works is the following. We'll create two different scenes, one for playing music and one for playing sound effects. And in games in general, it's a good idea to limit the amount of sound effects that can play simultaneously. Why? Well, let's imagine a Vampire Survivors-like game, right? You can have hundreds or thousands of enemies on the screen. If each of those enemies play a dying sound when they die, and you have a very powerful ability that clears the whole screen, playing 100 dying sounds simultaneously would probably blow the eardrums of the player, right? So that's not the best idea. It's actually much better to have a limit on how many sound effects can play simultaneously. So that's what we do here. Basically, this for loop ensures that we only play a sound effect if we have at least one child in that scene that is currently not playing any audio. And we have the single parameter, which makes sure that if we don't want to mix sounds together or we want to play one very distinct sound, we can stop everything else before actually playing that new sound. And this is really useful for music, for example, because most of the time you don't really want to play multiple tracks of music simultaneously, right? Especially not different tracks. When we want to play the music, we can set the single property to true to make sure that all the other players will be stopped before we start playing that song. However, for most of the sound effects, it's fine if another sound effect is playing and we play another one. So in that case, the single property will be false. This system gives us the flexibility to decide if we want to play a sound separately or not. And also we can add as many audio stream players as children as we want, right? If I want to have maximum, 16 sounds played at the same time, then I just need to add 16 children to the node. So that's all the code we really need. We can save this with Ctrl S. And let's go back to 2D view and click on the plus sign to add a new scene because we need to create those two scenes for the music player and the sound effects player. So click on the plus sign, click on other node as the root node and search for audio player. And you'll see that you can't really find this because we haven't added it to the globals yet. So let's click on cancel for now. Go to the project settings, and this is renamed in one of those Godot updates, so it's now called globals instead of auto loads. Click on globals, and you see we can select the path for the script here, but we don't really want to add the script. We want to create those scenes because we want to set the buses. So now we have this trap of we can't really add the node either, but we can't really set the properties yet because we only have a script and no scenes yet. But we can use that old school method of adding another node and using a simple node like we did and attaching that script to it. So let's just drag and drop audioplayer.gd. Now we have the script attached. We can double click and rename this to music player or something like that. And we just need to make sure that we add those audio stream player children. So let's press Ctrl A or click on the plus sign to add children and search for audio stream player, this one. And what we want to make sure of is that from all of these properties, the bus will be changed from master to music in this case. And with the node selected, we can actually duplicate this as many times as we want to have music tracks. So I probably always would play one song at a time in a game like this, but doesn't really cost much to duplicate it a couple of times. So let's say we can have 4 simultaneous music tracks playing, right? Let's press Ctrl S to save this, go to scenes, audio player, and save this as musicplayer.tscn. Click on save. And now since we have this, we don't have to do the whole thing again. We can just go to scene, save scene as, or press Ctrl Shift S, rename this to sfxplayer.tscn. Click on save or press enter. And now we have the SFX player open. So let's double click on the root node, rename this from music player to SFX player. And I want more sound effects than that simultaneously. So let's say we can have 16. So we'll duplicate this couple of times. So we have 16 nodes. And if I select the last one, press and hold shift and click on the first one, I can set all of those properties at once. And we want to change the bus from music to SFX and press Ctrl S to save this. You see if I click on any of those, the bus will be set to SFX. So we changed it at once. Okay, so now we can actually add those as auto loads because we have the two separate scenes we want. So let's go to the project and project settings again. And for the auto load tab, we want to set the path. So click on this folder icon here, go to scenes, audio player, music player first. And here you can use any name you want. This will be the global class name we can use to refer to it. Music player is fine, so click on add. And repeat the same process for the sound effects player. Here, I kind of like sound effects with capitalized letters, so I'll change this to SFX player, click on add. And now these two scenes will be automatically loaded when we run the project if this enable property is checked. So now if we close the project settings, press Ctrl S to save everything, and we run the game, nothing really happens and we don't really have sounds playing, but if we go to the remote scene tree, you see that above the arena, our root node we have two other nodes instantiated, right? And these are the SFX and the music players, and they have their corresponding audio stream players with the correct buses set to them. So now all that's left to do is to actually use them to play sounds and music inside the game. If you like my content, please consider checking out my Ko-fi page where you can donate one time or become a member and get early access to all my content and videos. And the process we'll be using here is pretty similar in each of these cases. We want to identify systems that will produce a sound effect, assign an export variable where we can set this from the inspector, and then add that one line of code that plays the sound whenever it makes sense. So let's start with the reroll button first. Press Ctrl-Shift-O to quick open a scene and search for rerollbutton.tscn. Click on the script icon to open its script. Add a new export variable, which will be an audio stream called reroll sound. And here we want to play this sound whenever we press the reroll button. So click on the onPressed callback method. And after we subtract 2 gold from the player, we can just call sfx player.play reroll sound. Again, we can reference this because it was added as an auto load singleton to the project. Awesome, so let's save this script with Ctrl S, and if we go back to 2D view and click on the root node, the reroll button node, you'll see that the reroll sound is empty. However, if we run the game now by pressing F5 or clicking on that icon, you'll see that if we click on the reroll button, you hear no sound, but also the game doesn't crash, you have no error messages. This is why we had that safeguard inside that audio player. If we go back to the script tab, this is why we have this line of code here, so we don't have to try to play anything when the audio stream is null, like in this case. But we don't actually want it to be null, so let's go back to 2D view. And for the reroll sound, click on this arrow, and we can either quick load or load it from our file system. If we click on quick load, we have reroll.ogg for the sound I provided for this starter project. Click on open, and now we should have the sound added. So if we press Ctrl S to save this and run the game again, rerolling should produce a sound now. And indeed it does. Awesome. So we essentially have to do the same thing for all the systems or all the pieces of our project which can produce a sound. And the next one will be the unit card. So press Ctrl-Shift-O again, search for unit_card. Click on the script icon next to the root node. And the process is pretty much the same. Scroll all the way up, add a new export variable, and when we buy a unit, the onPressed signal or callback method is where we want to do this. After emitting the unit bought signal, we can call sfxplayer.play and the buy sound. Save this with Ctrl S, go back to 2D view, select the root node, the unit card node, and assign that buy sound by pressing quick load, and we have buy.ogg. Save the scene with Ctrl S, press Ctrl-Shift-O again. And this time we want to do the unit combiner, but if we search for the unit combiner, you see that it's not a scene because it's a component we provided. So instead of quick opening the scene this time, press escape to close this, go to the script tab, press Ctrl-Alt-O and search for unit combiner.gd. Again, add a new export variable. We call this combine sound. And inside our combine units method, we'll just add a new line of code that when the animations start playing, we can play the combine sound as well. Save this with Ctrl S, go back to the arena scene, switch back to 2D view, because this is where we have our unit combiner. So if we click on the unit combiner node, you'll see the combine sound is empty. Click on this arrow, quick load, and we have combine.ogg. Save the arena scene with Ctrl S, press Ctrl-Shift-O, search for this cell_portal. click on the script icon. Again, add a new export variable called cell sound. And inside our cell unit method, after unit.q3, we can play the cell sound as well. Save the script with Ctrl S, go back to 2D view, assign the cell sound by clicking on the arrow, quick load, and search for cell.ogg. Save the scene with Ctrl S, press Ctrl Shift O, search for xp button.tscn, click on the script icon, create a new export variable called xp sound, and again inside the onPressed callback, we can just say sfxplayer.play xp sound. Save this with Ctrl S, go back to 2D view, click on the xp sound resources arrow, press quick load, and we have xp.by.ogg. Save the scene with Ctrl S. And the one final piece we need to do is the unit mover, and it's similar to the unit composer in a sense that we don't have a separate scene for it. So let's just go to the script tab, press Ctrl Alt O, and search for unit mover.gd. Scroll all the way up, add a new export variable called unit place sound. And here we actually want to play this multiple times, or you can actually do this however you like. What I ended up doing is we have this reset unit to starting position, and this is a method that we call when the unit is dragged to a position which is invalid. So after resetting it to the original dragging position, we can play the play sound. I think it feels kind of nice. And also inside our own unit dropped callback method, when we check for everything we have to, like swapping the units and all that stuff. But in the end, we'll call the move unit method, and I just want to play the sound once, right? This is why we don't include it to the move unit method, because then it would play twice when we swap units around, and I only want it to play it once. So we can just include it in the end here. And if we save this with Ctrl S, go back to the arena scene, go back to 2D view, select the unit mover component, and set that unit plays sound from an empty resource to unit place.ogg. Save the scene with Ctrl S, and we should be good to go with sound effects. We don't really need to keep any other scenes open now, so let's right click on the arena and click on close other tabs to keep things organized. And if we run the game now, we should have all our sound effects ready to go. It makes such a big difference, doesn't it? Okay, so music will be much easier to do because we only have to do it once. So I figured we can use one track for the whole arena. So let's select our arena node, our root node, click on the script icon here. And after scrolling all the way up, we can introduce a new export variable called arena music stream or something like that. And inside our ready callback, after connecting all the signals that we need, we can just say music player.play arena music stream, save the script with Ctrl S, go back to 2D view, and you see this arena music stream is empty, so we can just click on the arrow and quick load this OGG file from the music folder by double clicking on it. And now if we run the game, we should have music added on top as well. If you found it to be too loud, you can always go to the audio panel and just drag the music slider way down. And if we run the game again now, the music will be much more quiet compared to the sound effects. Awesome. So that wraps up season 1. One final thing we can do is we can tidy up a bit, see if we have any lying print statements or testing code or anything like that, because we don't really want to take those over to season 2. Finally, we can get rid of all these testing units because we no longer need them, right? We can buy units from the shop now if we want to, so we can select these and press delete. Also, under our data folder and units, I do have this testing Björn version, which I don't really need anymore, so I can just delete this, save the scene with Ctrl S, and if we go to the script tab, one thing we can check is if we have any lying print statements around by pressing Ctrl Shift and F, and we can search for print and then opening parenthesis. Click on find. I have no print statements left from the previous testing code, so I think we should be good to go. So that concludes season 1. I hope you liked it and learned a lot, and see you in season 2. Bye bye.